I had a team member reach out to me confidentially who said, Carmen, I really enjoy my employer. I'm content, I like what I do, but I don't feel that I am being utilized to the best of my abilities. So I want to know, what should I do? I want to start looking. I said, well, before you start looking, perhaps start asking.
I find that more and more companies are investing in their employees' career development. Staying at your current work might be the best step for you right now instead of looking elsewhere. But do you know how to talk to your boss about your next steps, or how to really identify the skills you want to keep using and the things you don't want to do anymore? Hi, this is Diana Bernal with Corner Office Latinas. I'm a career strategist who guides ambitious Latinas through major career moves. Today, I speak with Carmen Torres. She is a consultant who is the CEO and founder of My HR Specialist. We talk about how to identify and leverage your skills and interests into that next job, whether it's at your current company or the next. And Carmen shares her own interesting story of being an HR director who was being laid off herself and had to manage her own layoff, and then how she turned that into today's business. Okay, let's jump in. Hi, Carmen. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Diana. I'm so excited.
Well, you provide a variety of HR support for companies, and I was struck by the employers who want you to do career planning for their teams, which I think is really terrific. So before we talk about the employee side, tell me about your clients. Tell me about these companies that are asking for you to do some career development and what they are hoping to accomplish.
One of the things that the clients who reach out to me about career advisement for their team members are those companies and nonprofits who are looking to elevate their team, who are looking to provide a little extra, to their team members. As we know right now, it's so relevant for team members to have an edge over other individuals, or to be able to, when they are not sure about the path they're going into, they go to their supervisors, to their leadership, and ask, what can I do? How can I move ahead? Or why didn't I get that promotion? And this would be the reason why employers would want to provide this type of career support to their team to help them elevate and get to that next level.
Which I think is terrific, because if I remember my days being a manager inside a company, it was so much better to work with my existing team, right? Because I knew them. I knew what they could offer, and I knew that they didn't have drama, or I could avoid the ones that did have drama, because hiring today, you just don't know what you're going to get. And as a hiring manager, I would so much rather go with my known entities and develop them, even if it's for another year or two, because good people really are hard to find. So what would you say to that employee who is a little afraid to talk to her boss about a change, or why she didn't get a promotion, or what might be ahead for her? Because some people are intimidated by management, right? So walk us through how you might guide that person.
Yes. And I love that you're asking this, Diana. I love that, this is the kind of conversation we're having today, because employees should not be afraid to ask these questions. Employees should not be afraid to inquire about what their next move could be. And the perfect opportunity for them to do this is when they are doing check-ins with their management team. Many of these check-ins typically occur on a weekly basis. Quarterly, it could be a little bit more formal rather than informal, or even annually. And so if they have a promotion in mind for themselves, or they're thinking like, wow, I would really like to apply for that promotion that I just saw listed, or, for that new opportunity that I just saw listed, let me go and check in with my manager and to see what it is that I need to do in order to be considered for that role. And sometimes even before you see that opportunity listed, check in, during your first 90 days of employment, you're 6 months into it, right?
Yeah. And I think it is about creating a good open relationship with your boss. You know, they are the boss, but they're a human being and they're there to support you. And I think people forget that they are going to want you to succeed because if you succeed, then they're successful. And I think we forget that sometimes as employees. And I just talked about this, I think on my last episode too, that sometimes the grass is not always greener. Right? Sometimes someone will have a really bad day or a bad month or a bad 6 months at work and they think it's time to leave. And while that might be the case, have you really exhausted all opportunities at your current place of employment? Because it is so much easier to keep going there where you have already invested time and your reputation and they know you too. So I just want to remind people that you have so much more leverage than you know. When you are a good employee, you're contributing, they want to keep you because turnover is expensive. And I would much rather have that employee stay. So I would imagine that your clients are also talking to you about turnover to prevent turnover.
Yes, they are definitely. As a matter of fact, Diana, there was a situation a couple of years ago where I had a team member reach out to me confidentially who said, Carmen, I really enjoy my employer. I'm content, I like what I do, but I don't feel that I am being utilized to the best of my abilities. And nobody's recognizing that. So I want to know, like, what should I do? I want to start looking. I said, well, before you start looking, perhaps start asking your current manager what it is that you can do and even check in within yourself. Like if you're looking at the roles that are occurring in the workplace, what appeals to you? Is there anything else there that you would want to do? So ask the questions internally, exactly for the reason you said, Diana, the grass is not always greener on the other side, right? Especially when you've been there for a number of years
Yeah.
and you have certain perks and benefits.
Well, I love the way you phrased it too. Start asking instead of start looking. I think I might have to quote you on that too, because sometimes we just don't realize that if you have a conversation with your boss, it might turn into something better. I think people traditionally look at what's available. You're an accountant one, then you become a senior accountant, and then you become the manager. But sometimes, as I have done in my experience, there was not an open job, but I sat down with my boss and we created one. And so that is possible too. And again, if it gets you another 1 or 2 years at that employer, that's great. But it might also then prepare you for what your next step is. So let's talk about some of those employees who they are starting to reach the end of that path at that current employer, but they aren't going to leave for another year or two. What are some of the things that they can be thinking about knowing that they might want to leave a year or two down the road?
One of the things that I would suggest is for them to start looking at, their skills. Where are they feeling like maybe they don't have a lot of confidence in? Is it a particular software that maybe they've been asked to use and they're not really sure how to utilize it? Start taking some classes on those. Are you in accounting and do you need to update your skills on QuickBooks or, on Salesforce if you're in a marketing or in a sales industry position? So where are the areas where you need to just upgrade your skill set?
I think part of it is trying to figure out where do you want to be in another couple of years and then work backwards from that, right? Even if it is
Yeah.
at your current employer and you think you want to leave next year, do you have the management experience? Do you have the software experience? Do you have whatever skill set that you might want to deploy next year and 2 years? There's nothing wrong with tapping those skills and really cultivating that at your current employer because then you're just more productive for them and they're still getting a lot out of you as well. Let's talk about the people though who don't know what they want. They know they're hitting the ceiling at their current employer. They've been there for a long time and they know they're going to want something new, but they don't know where to start. So how do you guide people on getting that conversation going?
So one of the activities that I have conducted with a few team members is that I asked them to make 3 lists,
Mm.
right? One of them is a list of all of the things that they're currently doing with their employer. And then the second list is all of the things that they love that they are doing with their current employer. And then the third list would be a list of the things that they would rather not be doing
Ah,
anymore.
brilliant.
right?
Yeah,
Because we
yeah.
all have those. And, with that also is to start thinking about what are some of the things that bring you joy that you would like to add to your list of the things that you love.
Yeah, definitely. Is that enough to get them going? I mean, I imagine though, some of the clients I work with too, it still takes time because on one hand,
Yeah.
if you have a really blank slate, if you're a generalist, you can go in any direction. It's almost harder when you have those options. So are we journaling? Are we taking quizzes? What are some of the things we can start doing to hone in a little
Yes.
bit more?
Absolutely. So there are quizzes that you can look up. There are so many free quizzes available that are online for individuals to really test their skills and to test about, where are their likes and dislikes, where do they excel more. Also, test your communication styles, like understand your communication styles, because sometimes the way that we communicate with others may be holding us back, from certain conversations.
Well, let's talk more about that because I think so much of success in the workplace isn't just what we do, it's how we do it. So I'm sure you've been in that conversation working with a boss and the employee or trying to mediate between two employees who are having communication
Yes.
problems. Give us some tips there.
Yes, definitely. One of the things that I learned a while back, and I've been practicing, is listen to understand and not to respond. Right, Diana? Because many times what we're doing is that even in the workplace, when we're receiving feedback, we're hearing someone giving us feedback that maybe we're not agreeing with. And so we're already trying to figure out what our response is going to be and not really listening and understanding what is being shared with us so that we can use that to our advantage, so that we could use that as a learning opportunity. I recently had a situation similar to that where a team member, just kept responding and interrupting and got to the point where it's like, okay, this is the reason why it's not working for you. This is the reason why we haven't put you in the lead position, because your team has complained or has concerns about your listening ability. They do not feel heard. And so it was, an opportunity to share with them, but it was a fact as well that they were not listening to understand, but rather to respond.
Oh, that is a great one. I'll have to use that again too. See, I am getting so many tips from you, Carmen. So thank you for this,
You're
for
welcome.
getting us going. So I think about the skills. Okay. So if I'm an employee who is trying to figure out my 5-year plan, here are the things I enjoy doing. And then here are the things that I don't want to do anymore. I love that. And then
Yes.
how do I hone in on my different interests or market? Because even if I love to do something, maybe I live in an area in Southern California where they don't have that thing, or it's more outside of my scope. I mean, how do we start honing in on our skills and interests in a way that helps us get paid and gets the pay that we deserve?
Right. Well, for example, if you love writing, and this is an opportunity where you can leverage that writing ability anywhere. You don't have to work in California, for example. You could be out of the country and do that type of work. So, is there work that you can do outside of what you're normally doing? I had an individual who was tired of working in the office 9 to 5 on a regular basis. She just felt that whenever she was on vacation, she was her happiest. And so we worked through that. And I said, well, have you ever considered that maybe there is a job for you in travel? And she's like, well, no, not really. I need to get paid in order for me to be traveling. I said, exactly. You know, consider travel agent. Travel agents get to travel. They enjoy the work that they do. And as a matter of fact, she is definitely on that route right now. She stopped doing the work that she was doing. It was no longer fulfilling her. And she is now working with a travel agency who's supporting her and helping her build her business. So it's super, super exciting. And it doesn't happen that way for everyone. But for her, she knew that it was the end of the road at the location where she was at, and she had to make a drastic change.
Yeah, I actually have at least one or two friends who work for cruise ship companies and they get all the perks and the benefits of travel. So that is a way of looking at your interests, because I think some people think, well, my interests are music or sports. And let's say I want to work for a gaming company because I'm into sports. And that is one way of looking at it. But I think it's also looking at your interests as far as where you are in your life. Like, do you want to work at a tech startup because you enjoy learning about the technology? Or are you more mission driven and you want to work for a nonprofit? So there are different ways, I think, at looking at our own interests. But travel, I think that's also a great example there.
Yes, definitely. And as a matter of fact, I do have another team member from a company a handful of years ago who she felt that, the corporate industry for her was just no longer what she was looking for, and that she wasn't being, she didn't feel that she was making a difference where she was at. And where she had been volunteering for a year or so, an opportunity became available. The opportunity didn't pay as much as, her employer at the time. However, what developed from that is that she was able to have flexibility because it was a nonprofit, and probably because they didn't have the funds that, you know, would have allowed her to be paid what she was worth. They do have more flexibility, and they have different perks and time off. And so that actually allowed her to feel that she was making a difference, and she was just filled with joy because of the work that she was now doing, helping people in the community, making a difference.
And that's a great success story that reminds us that we need to really check in on what our interests are, because what we're interested in today might evolve 4 or 5 years down the road. Maybe you need more flexibility. Maybe you don't need that flexibility. So things change. And I was just at a conference last week where I reminded people that even if you're satisfied with your work where you are now, it's important to check in every year. Just think like, is this working for me? What am I going to need next year? And, I envy those people who always had those 5-year plans and they knew exactly where they wanted to be and what they wanted their job to be 5 years from now. I was not always one of those people. So we're talking about different ideas here for those folks, but let's talk about the people who do say that they know exactly what they want to do 5 years from now, because I don't want them to miss out either. I don't want folks to be so committed to a plan that a new opportunity comes in front of them and they miss it because they're stuck in what they think they should be doing 5 years from now.
Oh, Diana, this is a great, great segue into my thoughts around that. What happened in the beginning of 2020 with COVID, right, is that it actually shifted everyone's plans.
Yeah.
What we thought we were going to be doing even 3 months from now, next week, everything shifted immediately. And so what I have been noticing since then is that people are no longer looking at a 5-year plan. People are actually really looking at, what do I want today? And what's going to make a difference for me today? What's going to make me happy today? And people are leaving their jobs sooner now than they ever have before. People are not afraid to step out of their role and into something new. But again, it is difficult, and it is becoming more difficult to find the role that you want, because employers are also struggling and they're not hiring as much as they were, and they're not as competitive. However, if we take that back and think about, yes, maybe, you thought that in 5 years you were going to be the manager in the marketing department. But now that is not something that brings you joy, and you want to spend time with, whether you have grandchildren or nieces and nephews or your pets, whoever you want to spend time with, right? You want to make more time for that, because now being in a management role, it means that you're probably going to be working 55 hours a week, as opposed to, a set schedule at 40 hours a week that will give you the freedom to spend time with those you love, or the freedom to kick your feet up at the end of the day and enjoy a relaxing evening. So people are starting to look at, is that really what I want? Is the pay, that extra pay, really going to make a difference for me today? Or do I want some peace and, just being able to enjoy my time?
And I think one of the things that you're saying is values, knowing your values, and how the importance of family or community kind of comes and goes depending upon what time you need. Like if you need flexibility for pickup and drop off, but you still have a family value. So that might mean that there are certain ways that you're going to do your job. That way you are still available to family. So I think it is important for people to think about, what are your top 3, 4, 5 values when it comes to work. That way you can stick to it, because one day you might get that phone call from your boss saying, hey, Carmen is leaving us and I need you to run the division. And that's going to mean that you're going to have to hop on a plane once a month. Are you ready for
Right.
that? Does that work for you? But if you know what your values are, then you can respond with intention about, okay, is this going to work for me now? Is this something I can do for 2 years? Or maybe you have to say no to it. So I
Right.
think,
Or with boundaries, you can respond with boundaries too.
yes. And maybe you can
Mhm.
shift things. I
Yes.
often talk to people about negotiating, because sometimes they'll ask for something in the office and it would be so easy if the boss would say yes or no, but they often come back with other. Right? They come back, well, we're going to say yes, but this is what we want from you. Or we're going to say yes, but this is the money. It's not quite what you had in mind. So being able to negotiate the in between, I think, is key. So let's talk about you, Carmen. I want to hear how you ended up in human resources, because I think you and I have a lot in common about how we got into HR.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So, I ended up in human resources because I became the executive assistant to the CFO at a really nice company back in the early 90s. And what happened at that point is I was working doing payroll, and eventually I became the liaison for the Spanish speaking team members who, needed some support. So I went through that process. Eventually, just I found myself in positions where I was helping employees. I was helping communicate information, benefits, sensitive situations. And eventually, I just realized, like, wow, this is really something I love doing. I love helping people in this way. And I felt fulfilled. Like, I can tell you that I've never had a day where I have said, oh, it's Monday, I hate my job. And I think because I really did choose to do something that I enjoy, which was helping people. And eventually I went to a position. I decided that I was ready to take on HR as a full-time role, and not just as an assistant to the CFO or as an executive assistant to the president, but rather in HR so that I could really make a difference. The employer that I had, it gave me an opportunity to go back to school. I went to Loyola Marymount, where I got into a program for human resources management. And oh my gosh, Diana, as soon as I got out of that program, I was just so excited and so looking forward to like what my next step would be. And I mean, I've been loving it ever since. That was in 2003 or 2001 or 2003 when I made that decision. And gosh, look at me, at the word 2024 and my own business. So please ask me any questions.
Well, I want to stick with this point, though, because you just listed a great example of what we were talking about earlier, to look at your skills and your interests broadly. You like to help people. So helping people can be a teacher or a social worker, but it can be human resources. It can be working for a big, huge corporation, to working at a bank. I think of mortgage brokers and how they help people. And I think there's lots of corporate roles where you help people. So I think getting in touch with those values again of how you like to show up at work, and it can mean anything. So tell us, though, how you ended up being self-employed, because I think there's a great hustle story here of how you took lemons and made lemonade.
Yes, definitely. What happened is in 2008, we know everything that happened,
Yeah. Big crash.
and so in 2009, I was the operations director of HR at a really awesome company. And the company that we were working with received some news that we were not going to be able to complete the project that we were working on because another company had gone under and they were not completing their part of the project. So at that point, the executive team came to me and said, Carmen, we are in a situation where we must lay off 90% of the staff
Wow.
in 2 days.
Wow.
And I'm like, oh my goodness. Okay, let's get working on this. So
Yeah.
we got working on it. It was really incredible how intentional these conversations were going to be with all of the team members. So eventually we laid off 90% of the team within those 2 days or 2.5 days. And 3 months later or so, I processed my own layoff.
Wow.
And, I still agreed to support them in different ways for a little bit of time after that. But I had a decision that I had to make because I was no longer going to be employed. I literally was laying myself off. And so I had to decide, do I go and apply for unemployment benefits and figure out what to do? Or do I take advantage of my vacation payout that I had and, leverage that to see what I can do with this situation? And so what started to happen as I was thinking about that, because I felt I had a little bit of time. I had, at least 4 to 6 weeks to think about what I wanted to do long term. And what started happening during that time, Diana, is that small business owners were reaching out to me. Hey, Carmen, I know you do HR. Can you tell me how to handle this situation? Can I lay off so and so? And if I do this, how would that impact me? And so I started realizing that business owners, even though they were terminating their HR teams, they still needed HR support. And so I started consulting on an hourly basis, supporting them wherever they needed. I found myself no longer having to consider unemployment benefits. And instead, I became an independent contractor and it turned into a business. A few years later, I realized that I was just supplementing my income by being an independent contractor, working with great businesses and nonprofits. And then I recognized that it was time for me to develop my business. I had conversation with a couple of girlfriends and, also in with that business mindset. And we created my company, which is My HR Specialist. And so with that, I've been in business now for 10 years as my HR specialist, but working on my own for 15 years. So it's been amazing.
Well, I think one of the things to take away from your experience, Carmen, is that you had a skill set and you were really good at it and you did enjoy it, even though you got laid off. But that's how then people turn to you because they knew of you, they knew your reputation. And so that's a reminder to make sure to always be leaning into whatever your skill set is, because people will know about you and people will call you. And that's how recruiting happens. I mean, we know so many jobs that actually take place or that are found through networking because of a really great reputation, right? And so
Definitely.
that's what you did. And then you created your own business. But I also have to ask you about what that was like to lay yourself off, because being in human resources myself, and we all know the stories of other people. And I had a friend who not only did she have to oversee the West Coast layoff for her entire division, she literally was the one who had to turn off the lights on the way out and close up the office. And here she was with her own HR package, closing the office, shutting off the lights. So what was that like, being on both sides of the layoff at the exact same time?
Luckily, because it was a situation that was brought to my attention early on, it really gave me an opportunity to look at this from a different perspective. First of all, the way that the executive team wanted to manage this and communicate it to the team, it really gave me peace. And I felt supported, first of all, by the executive team. Secondly, I knew that I would eventually be laid off. I didn't know how soon after. But what I did with that time is that I started considering all of my options. And one of the things, Diana, about what we were talking about earlier about, using this to your advantage with what we love to do, you talk about it. And what I started doing is that I started talking about it. I started talking to different business owners and friends who were business owners and still till this day. And so because I love the work that I do. And when we're always in that conversation, when we share about the things that we love to do, people remember us. And I feel that that's what I was able to do, right? Is that because people were remembering like, oh, you know what, Carmen does HR, then for me, it was a simple shift. And yes, it was scary because who wants to go from earning, a six-figure income to now doing your own billing and, trying to figure out when you're going to get paid. I mean, yes, of course. I always say, look, you never know. First of all, we never know what's going to happen. So I always recommend have a little cushion, regardless of how long you've been at your employer. Always have that little cushion, 2 month, 3 months cushion to help you really make decisions without fear. And particularly with women, we a lot of times make decisions or not make decisions out of fear.
Right.
So that financial support will always give you a little kick and allow you to take those risks.
Definitely having that financial cushion at least 3 to 6 months will give you a little bit of comfort, because if something does come your way and you don't want to be forced into a decision, or you don't want to have to take something and settle. So if you've got a little bit of cushion, that gives you the confidence to wait for that right thing. So Carmen, tell me a little bit about your business now, because I also think you have a book that I want to make sure we share.
Thank you, Diana. Yes, so my business is My HR Specialist, and we provide human resources support to businesses and nonprofits. We work with your management team, your leadership team. We help them everything from hiring to firing, even though I hate to say it that way.
Yeah.
But the truth is, we help you, develop your employee handbook. We help you train at performance management. And yes, I recently had my book published. It's called The Smart HR Solution, and it's about helping you avoid legal challenges. And there are so many things that are happening in the workplace environment, so many laws that are just ever changing. And so the book, what it does is that it just gives you a guide, and it provides you with a solution to be able to address things as they come up, helping you minimize your risk of employment liability.
Oh, well, I think a lot of people, that would be worth the price of admission right there, especially in the state of California, where there are so many laws and they're constantly changing. Carmen, what is your website? Where can people find you?
They can find me at www.myhrspecialist.com.
And I will link to that into the show notes. Carmen, thank you so much for all this great insight. I know we went sort of all over the place, but I think it was really interesting and really helpful.
Thank you, Diana, so much. It's been such a pleasure to connect with you.
Take care.
You too.
Thank you for listening. For more, visit cornerofficelatinas.com, where we give you the framework, inspiration, and support you need to reach and thrive in the corner office. We have some free downloads on the website, where you can also sign up for our e-news, so we can keep you posted on workshops and events coming up that you will not want to miss. That's cornerofficelatinas.com. See you next week.